On the edge of the frontier, the Old West lived to a rough rhythm, oriented toward survival. Far from the conservative East, Puritan punishments found no ground. In the dusty towns, a more flexible morality prevailed. Negotiated rules, suspended judgments, and each person setting their own boundaries to keep going, in a territory in the making. Before continuing, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Thank you. In 1843, Tom Tobin, an Irish-American, stood out in the Old West. His path took him from mountain man to sought-after tracker, precise hunter, and guide who knew every trail. He also served as a scout for the United States Army, combining courage and skill to open routes through contested territories and support expeditions that shaped that frontier. In the Old West, drinking beer at room temperature was the rule. In contrast with European customs, where the drink usually arrived cold, that almost never happened there. In 1873, in the region's towns and villages, the supply came mainly from local production or small breweries, which supplied saloons and travelers. It was the taste of the land and the climate. In the image, Red Cloud, an Oglala chief, appears with a full headdress, a symbol of his people's cultural and spiritual strength. Before him, American Horse appears in Western attire, with a gun in his holster. The scene, by contrasting tradition and assimilation, invites reflection on the paths imposed by the West's advance. Between them, a heavy silence tells of conflicts and adaptations. In the Old West, hunting was a key factor. After securing water, the challenge was to put food on the table, a basic condition for keeping pioneer settlements standing. Faced with arid territories and long distances, settlers developed butchering and gathering techniques, mapped the fauna, and drew from the landscape the resources that sustained their families. In the waning years of the 19th century, daily life in the West moved between progress and hardship. While cities grew and machines gained ground, the backcountry kept its own rhythm. There, cowboys drove herds along long routes, linking ranches, railways, and markets. Their quiet work kept the economic machinery in motion. Since the earliest times, humanity has sought shortcuts out of suffering. In the Old West, that hope took shape in cure-alls, bottles that promised a little of everything. They claimed to ward off deadly diseases, bring luck, and soften sadness. Amid fairs and wagons, they sold not only elixirs, but the idea that a single dose would be enough to turn life around. The history of the Old West begins with water. Long before the territory became part of the United States, each river, well, and spring defined routes, settlements, and disputes. In vast, dry lands, the supply shifted with the seasons. The same resource that sparked quarrels also forged pacts and neighborliness, keeping settlements alive. In the mid-19th century, the California gold rush became a magnet for adventurers, merchants, and entire families. Amid tents and trails, life buzzed in the saloons. There, as stories crossed lantern-lit tables, poker took the stage. Game, bluffs, and fortune-shaping alliances, rivalries, and the pace of the nights. At first glance, Killer Jim Miller seemed like a pillar of the Old West. He greeted neighbors, paid his bills, went to church. That image, carefully cultivated, shielded him from suspicion. So when clues to brutal crimes emerged, the town hesitated. How could they accept that that model of conduct was, in the shadows, a cold-blooded killer? After the discovery of gold in California, a flow of men and women pressed westward. More than shiny stones, they sought a fresh start. They abandoned routines, crossed unknown lands, and accepted extreme risks. The promise of change guided each step, and the possibility of a find was enough to keep them on the move. In the Old West, the barber's chair held more than trims. Amid razors and towels, it also treated wounds, pulled teeth, and prescribed potions. The tradition came from long ago, from times when medical knowledge was scarce and poorly organized. Thus, the barber shop also served as a small outpost of care for those seeking quick relief. On the long crossings of the Old West, cowboys kept up their energy with what fit in the saddle. Beans on the camp stove, hardtack that didn't spoil, jerky easy to carry, handfuls of dried fruit, and strong coffee. Simple, sufficient, and reliable to keep going day after day, from dawn to dusk, without rest. Branding cattle isn't new. It began with the Egyptians around 2700 BC. Over the centuries, the practice crossed seas and in the Middle Ages gained ground in Europe. From there, it followed the trail of colonial routes and reached the present-day southwest of the United States, brought by Spanish cowboys and later by Mexicans. Thus, the iron became the herd's signature. With the California gold rush, demand for mail exploded and opened trails westward. Letters, contracts, and news crossed deserts as camps grew. Prospectors, traders, and pioneers followed the same current. They sought fortune, markets, and a new beginning. And with each delivery, the frontier advanced one more step. At the edge of the Old West, each day began as a test. Establishing a home demanded steady hands and patience. Nothing came ready-made. Water, shelter, harvest, everything demanded effort. And work called early. As soon as they could hold a bucket or sweep the floor, 4- or 5-year-old children were already sharing chores, learning to support the household alongside their elders. In the twilight of the 19th century, the buffalo hunt sustained part of the West's economy. Leavenworth, Kansas became a meeting point. Warehouses, merchants, and tanneries received shipments arriving from the plains. There, hides were bought, processed, and redistributed, moving money, work, and new trade routes. Allison, a notable name of the Old West, saw his guns as an extension of his own instinct. He didn't call himself a gunfighter, he preferred to be called a marksman. Between duels and demonstrations, he mastered the six-shooter with rare precision. His fame grew in that contrast between technique and attitude, which made him a reference in the art of shooting. After the Pueblo Revolt in 1680, horse culture gained strength among the plains' indigenous peoples. United, the Pueblo communities expelled the colonizers from New Mexico and in the conflict captured thousands of horses and other Spanish herds. From then on, the animals spread among the tribes, transforming travel, hunting, and war. On the march westward, pioneers and cowboys crossed the frontier with a common habit: coffee. Around campfires and on long rides, the cowboys became its most faithful, brewing kettles at dawn to handle the work. It wasn't a luxury. It was liquid energy that kept eyes alert and steps steady in the vastness. Roy Bean, born around 1825 in Mason County, Kentucky, set his course west early. At 15, he left home and followed two older brothers in search of his own path. The crossing brought risks and opened doors. From region to region, he led a nomadic life, changed trades many times, and learned to survive while the horizon called. Mastering the lasso, a key part of ranching, was born from the contact between traditions. In the 18th century, the technique reached the West at the hands of Spanish conquerors and took shape with ranchers and their Mexican hands, the vaqueros. From there, the dialogue with Texas cowboys shaped practices, language, and working style that crossed borders. For decades, the Old West has occupied a central place in the American imagination. Between the plains of the Midwest and shifting frontiers, stories of travel, disputes, and reinvention emerge. Books and films fed this vision, linking courage and risk to the advance of settlers and cities, and keeping alive the idea that adventure shapes destinies and draws shared memories. Anna Emmeline McDoulet, Cattle Annie, emerged in the Old West alongside Jenny Stevens' Little Britches. Still teenagers, they traded ordinary life for risky rides. They watched trails, served as messengers, and provided cover for gangs, in addition to taking part in robberies. Together, they became legends among outlaws. Their names echoed across the frontiers. Before 1858, Colorado's expansion proceeded without urgency for railroads. The turning point came with the gold found near present-day Denver. The rush attracted people, capital, and goods. To connect mines, settlements, and markets, tracks advanced. In a few years, they became the axis of the state's growth, economy, integration, and settlement. Nearly 2 centuries ago, the Texas Rangers emerged to shape the state's history. As a force of law and security, they patrolled the vast border, mediated conflicts, and protected those seeking a home in the region. That trajectory explains why their name still carries weight in the Texas imagination. If you enjoyed it, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments.